So in this podcast, I want to follow up with a top-down view regarding Eldar Aspect Warriors in 40K, offering my insights from the perspective of Dire Avengers, Banshees, and Fire Dragons. That's kind of the trinity that we're going to start with, as I have the most experience with that. And then in future podcasts, later on in the week, or maybe early next week, we're going to get more into the details, the tactica, the direct application of these aspects on the tabletop, depending on the rest of the composition of your army. So for the most part, certainly playing Eldar has gotten better over the years, a little bit easier in terms of model choices and dice output, but there still are some legacy aspects in the army that even carry over into today. And if I can just mention this idea of legacy aspects in 40K, for a minute or two, it is relevant to this podcast, but it's important tactica to know and kind of frame everything else. Warhammer 40,000, starting with Rogue Trader and moving through the various editions, it's this Frankenstein monster of not only rules, but components, maybe like Windows, something from long ago, from the .com times or Y2K, where you have this pretty interface and the models look great, but the DNA, the decision-making trees, the logic, the machine language, I'm not invoking the tech priests of Mars here, the machine language behind it is quite old, and Games Workshop has been very, very hesitant to tinker with it. They just keep on pushing it forward down the road. This idea of, and I am simplifying a little bit here because I don't want to take up a ton of time. If we look at Space Marines, Toughness 4, there's this idea where in 40K we want things to be somewhat fair, so we play at the same level of resources in the game, and Games Workshop comes up with a value rating for each unit, for each model. Of course, combining models together and chaining models and having different ways to utilize that kind of blows that piece apart. But in theory, we're playing with the same stuff. And the early point structures were essentially based off Space Marines. This idea that a Space Marine stock was Toughness 4, 1 wound, 3-up save, bolter, and a couple of side rules, and they shall know no fear, and other things over various editions. And that kind of clocked in at a certain point level. Now, maybe if you wanted grenades, back in the day, you added +1. Some of the sub-chapters, Space Wolves and Blood Angels, you had some supplemental rules, so that added the cost a little bit. But everything else in the 40K universe, based on that matrix, on that profile, if it was better than a Space Marine, it cost a lot more points. If it was less than a Space Marine, it cost a lot less. Working off of a D6 base system. And this is the genesis. This is the DNA of the aspects, which still hold through till today. The idea being that I could throw down 2 Gaunts, 3 Gaunts, 4 Gaunts, Tyranids, and your Space Marine would stand a reasonable chance of killing them with a bolter, simply because, well, you're hitting on 3s, I'm hitting on 4s, I don't get an armor save, you do. I'm wounding you on, depending on the edition, 4s or 5s. You're wounding me on 3s because of the toughness difference. So you're going to do, and you're rapid firing, so you're going to do 2 shots. But that doesn't hold true in a D6 based system, because if I can generate enough dice, or I can get lucky, and lucky's 1 in 6, or 33% chance of scoring a 5 or a 6, or you rolling for your saves a 1 and 2, or 3 if there's an AP on there. It doesn't hold up. The point cost doesn't hold up. So these are the legacy aspects of it. So through the years, this idea with the Eldar Codex was, for the most part, the models were more expensive than Marine or Imperial Guard, or certainly some of the lower stat Xenos races like Orcs and Tau, but Orcs and Tau made up for it in sheer volume, because your initiative was better, your basic weapon profile was a little bit better, you had a couple of special rules throughout the various editions that did things, so your stock Eldar choices were pricey. But then as soon as you move into the aspects where they have potentially the better stats, weapon skill, ballistic skill, initiative, not toughness, versus, I mean, they are space elves, versus Marines, now you add on better weapon profiles, the ability to take those in multiples, like fire dragons, potentially a better weapon profile, and the ability to take multiples, boosted by the X-Arc, boosted by squad-wide abilities or individual embedded abilities in there, it sends the points through the roof. Well, they are more elite, but we go back to being a D6-based system, and if you get lucky 33% of the time, you're going to chew through my space elves. So there was always this feeling of playing Eldar that, yes, the aspects were powerful, but they excelled only in one area of the game. Fire dragons for slagging tanks, howling banshees, scorpions to an extent also, in there for close assault, dark reapers essentially taking down marines. We're not doing any kind of the shadow or hidden aspects in there. And Phoenix Lords are a completely different beast in themselves on there. But you would kind of match up what the aspect was to what you expected to fight. A good friend of mine who played Foot Eldar for a long time took a lot of Dark Reapers and was decimating guys at the club because everyone played Space Marines. But as soon as we started hitting up the tournament scene, where at the time you're going up against parking lot guard, here's 10 chimeras with 5 veterans each with plasma guns and dozens of sentinels and Valkyries everywhere. His army folded so fast because, congratulations, you wiped out 5 veterans. I've got 50 more, plus all my other toys, plus everything else. And he just couldn't, with that very specialized and focused area, it didn't matter that he was over-delivering. He just couldn't chew through the models on the table. So pushing into today, that still exists for the aspects. And it's interesting that this question, this podcast, this comment comes on the heels, because it was directly related. It's back up in the archives. This idea of wound inflation in the current edition of 40K. And this is a departure where everything has been reduced to streamline the system to wounds. It's still taken me a while. I still think of armor values and things like that. But essentially, you're chewing through wounds. And Games Workshop, again, this legacy system of just wounds, increase the wounds, increase the cost. It must be stronger because it has more wounds. But with the ability to generate dice pools and the ability to take low-cost, high-volume infantry and just spam dice out. And as the edition has moved on, it's not only just the trash mob spam like cultists and stuff or guard players. There are many options across various factions to take high-volume, high-strength shots. So what we find is it's not like, okay, look, Fritz has got tons and tons of cultists here. He's got auto guns on everything, but they're only strength 3. So first you have to hit, and then we're already a step down from the strength. So in theory, it's a big dice pool, but you have to hit, you have to wound, you have to negate armor, you got to kind of move through there. But certain builds and certain codexes with the ability to take everything everywhere at any time, you're putting down massive amounts of shots that are most likely going to hit. You're putting down high strength, high volume shots. It's going to chew through everything. So we're moving into the aspects on there. You don't need them as much. You don't. There were certain army aspects you needed them to deal with things in 40K. You don't need them anymore. I use them in my Footdar list. That doesn't mean don't play them. That doesn't mean they don't have a place. But they're not mandatory auto-include if you want to try and be competitive. That's good because it frees up a lot more variety. It frees up a lot more tactics. Or as you're developing your list, it allows what I call the swap in, the swap out. So we're going to kind of frame that for a second here because I believe this is important for the aspects also. I come up with a theme. I come up with an idea. At least this is how I like to approach playing 40K. It's not the way, it's a way to do that. I do it in Battletech, I do it in X-Wing, I do it in other things. I want to play a certain something on the table. All jet bikes. I want to play something certain on the table. Tomb Kings in space, just lots and lots of Necron warriors and monoliths and destroyers and scarabs pushing forward. I want to play something like Cornate Berserkers running across the field, putting you to the bolt pistol and chainsword. In Battletech, I want to play a lot of long-range missile carriers and mechs, so I can literally real-time rain down hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of long-range missiles on your army every turn. Imagine what that looks like. So you get this idea, and I build a list tactically to incorporate those models, to incorporate those tactics at a given level. But I leave a little bit of model resources, a little bit of points where I can swap units in and out. They're not key to making the army work. They're not a kind of a linchpin to make that army work. It's kind of bonus stuff on there. And what that allows me to do, okay, better example, my Samhan Warhost, I've got jet bikes. That is the bulk of what I push out. I've got Vipers backing those jet bikes. I haven't seen Vipers in use for forever. Not that they were ever really overly used. And then I have Wave Serpents to kind of back up the jet bikes and add some more mobility in there. And of course, we've got Space Elf magic and all that stuff. What goes in those Wave Serpents certainly can be tailored based on maybe what I'm feeling in the moment, but it's not necessary to make the list work on there. So I have flexibility swapping things out and in. That's one of the ways you can begin to approach using the aspects, where it's going to change the tactics of your army a little bit with how your opponent is going to deal with these units when they appear, but it's not going to alter the complex DNA of your tactics and strategy of your army on the table. So that's kind of the second level. The next piece in utilizing them, my opinion, of course, and this is held up through a number of editions, and those of you who have experience playing this, certainly in the comments, absolutely. When in doubt, you take Fire Dragons. They can engage a variety of targets. They can pretty much slag anything out there, and they are a major threat with what they're going up against. Of course, matching up your unit with the appropriate target is key. I don't want to slag a bunch of cultists. I want to go up against like Chaos Space Marines, or I want to go up against multi-wounds on there and just be like pow, 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 and just melt you, vape you on there. Dire Avengers are really good at killing high armor troops, where you need to generate consistent volumes of shots, maybe like an elite shock troop. Not that Space Elves are elite shock troops. So I don't want to throw those against cultists, but I'll throw them up against your heavier infantry or certain infantry aspects of your army that I have to make disappear, hopefully in one turn. So there is still this pinpointing aspect to it, but you can't lead with these units. There's this idea, if I can borrow wave theory, with my Berserkers of Scalathrax army, where I call it waves to distinguish how they break up. Certainly it's not like I send in the first wave and let you just deal with that, and then I send in the second wave and let you deal with that, and then the third wave and let you deal with that, simply because that would be like your entire army dealing with 1/3 of my army at a time. Everything's mixed in, but the exact when and where it hits is a little bit different. So my first wave is designed to hit you hard and fast, to keep you locked down in your deployment zone and to keep you busy. Second wave is lots and lots of Cornate Berserkers. They come in and just kind of mop up on there. That first wave going in is going to take the entire brunt of your army. It might not make it. Sometimes it doesn't make it in. Sad face, but it is 40K on there, but it still at least buys me a turn or two. Most of the time, it's about 50-50. I make it in, I lose the whole first wave, but I've given you a pretty good bloody nose and I've kept you busy for 2 turns on the table on there. I can't lead with the aspects because they are Space Elves. You're going to gun them down, and being my higher value model resources, they're not. I guess what I'm saying is you don't lead with them. We have 3 phases of the game: the beginning of the game, the mid game, and end game. You don't lead with them on the way in. You need something else. I mean, every space elf is precious on here. What that exactly is going to be, you have to figure that out. You need something else to reduce the model count of your opponent. I do this exercise visually, but sometimes it's worth, for the first time, just pulling it out of your gaming case. You might not have enough dice. Pull out a couple of units and put the dice that they can respond with, that they can shoot with in one turn next to that unit, or some tokens or some pennies, or write it on a piece of paper. I find little tokens, pennies, or dice visually to signal what they can output. That is your dice pool. That is your entire dice pool for your army. You need to, the dice pool that your opponent can generate, you need to bring that down a little bit. You need something to reduce the output before you send in the aspects. The second thing is, with the inflation of models on the table, your opponent literally, for the beginning of the game until they move into the mid-game, they are everywhere and everywhere on the table. Everything overlaps fields of fire. There's not much maneuverability. It's funny how more and more of 40K for me, and disclaimer, it could be my local meta, it feels like I'm playing Warhammer Fantasy more and more. I just, even with a highly maneuverable army like my Samhan Warhost, it feels like we're just setting up across from each other and rolling a lot of dice. I guess that's some of the appeal of Kill Team and other aspects on there that make it very, very tactical and intriguing with it. Brings me back to the day where armies were a little bit more manageable. So you need to also not only reduce the dice output, but create pockets of maneuverability. So when you drop in those aspects and you slag, frag, take out, whatever it's going to be, you're not hit the next turn by everything, by that return fire. So they're really a mid game where you've reduced the dice pool and you've damaged your opponent and you have a place to maneuver. Because ideally, now the delivery system to get them up there, the support to make that happen, other units that, because your opponent, you're not going to just let me roll up my fire dragons. You're going to have a speed bump. You're going to have units to try and stop that. How you stop that, that's, I'd have to know what models you have and kind of what the tactics that you're looking to employ with that. I'll leave that question, or I should say that answer, for you. But mid-game, when you move in there, what you're looking to do is, so I'm going to take my Dire Avengers and I'm going to match them up against the tactical squad. I'm hoping to vape that tactical squad, take it out, and in the return fire, because I've created pockets of maneuverability where not everything of yours is in range, or at least not rapid fire range, and the dice output of what's nearby for what I'm hitting, I've at least reduced. I brought it down a little bit. That means you hit my Dire Avengers, because of course you're going to shoot back. I lose a few. Sad face. Not happy about it. But now the next turn, I've still got a good dice pool. I'm still in the game. It's still a threat. It's not just it's not like my my Terminators, my Chaos Terminators. I drop them in. They roll a lot of dice. I take some skulls, and then they're gone in one turn because you're like, I can't let them live on there. We don't lead with the aspects. That's a very tactical, or I should say reverse that. Strategic is what you look at. Tactics is what you execute. That is the very strategic view of them. I got to look at the schedule. Early next week, we will look at the tactical levels for each one of the aspects to put on the table.